Welcome to Military Analytics. Russia is suffering one of the most stunning defeats in history against the legendary defense of the Ukrainian army. The mass surrender of Putin's soldiers is changing the fate of the war. But what is the reason for the surrender of Russian soldiers to Ukrainian soldiers who are believed to be weaker than them despite being outnumbered? The number one reason is, of course, the exemplary defense of the Ukrainian army in many areas. With an historic resistance, the Ukrainian army managed to foil all of Russia's plans. But can the success of an army force its enemies to surrender? This question is very important. Let us go to the battlefield to answer it. Russia currently occupies 3 regions in Ukraine: Luhansk, Donetsk and Zaporizhia. Castle, the largest regional capital occupied by Russia, was liberated by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army managed to push Russia to the eastern side of the Dnipro River. Of course, this was not easy. The Ukrainian army managed to gain the upper hand in this war by making very important strategic moves. In total, more than 90,000 Russian soldiers have been killed so far. The first reason that pushed the Russian soldiers to surrender was this feeling of great defeat. Russian soldiers are now fully convinced that they cannot win this war against Ukraine. The Ukrainian army has managed to gain the psychological upper hand. So many soldiers have died in the Russian army that all the soldiers who are fighting now think that they will be killed if there was a conflict. That's why they are trying to escape from the army or surrender immediately. On many fronts, Russian soldiers immediately started waving white flags when they saw the Ukrainian army. Russian soldiers surrendered by raising their hands without any conflict. The Ukrainian army is constantly sharing these images. Ukrainian drones record all the movements of the Russian army. The surrender images of Russian soldiers are also recorded by Ukrainian drones. When these images are shared on social media accounts, they attract great attention. The biggest interest is shown by other Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers share these images with each other and say that they should surrender. In addition, the Ukrainian army shows a very positive approach towards the surrender to Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers who surrendered to the Ukrainian army say that they were treated very well in the videos they shot and called on other Russian soldiers to surrender. In the most popular of these videos, the Russian soldier said, "Here they give us hot food, winter clothes, and a comfortable bed." None of this is in the Russian army. Zelensky took a very important step in this regard and made a call to Russian soldiers to surrender. It is claimed that thousands of soldiers surrendered after the speech of the Ukrainian leader who addressed Russian soldiers on television. This critical move of Zelensky is considered as one of the events that changed the course of the war. Here is what Zelensky said in this program. "We have been listening to your conversations among yourselves. We know what you think about the senseless war, the shame, and your state on behalf of the Ukrainian people. We offer you a choice. If you surrender to our forces, we will treat you the way people deserve to be treated, the way you are not treated in the army, the way your army does not treat our army. The choice is yours." There are other reasons why Russian soldiers are so eager to surrender. For this, we need to know the structure of the Russian army. The Russian armed forces have 1,014,000 active and 2 million reserve personnel. It is also the second largest power in the world in terms of the number of soldiers. In addition to mercenaries in the Russian army, there are soldiers from many different ethnic elements. The Russian Federation has 22 republics. Minority people living in these regions are also recruited in the army. However, racism is quite high in Russia. Soldiers recruited from minority regions are treated very badly. Russian commanders do not care about the death of minority soldiers. This situation increases tensions in the Russian army. Soldiers who are mistreated by their commanders are much more willing to surrender because these assimilated people do not want to fight for Russia. At this point, it is necessary to open a very important topic in Russia. It is not believed that this war contributes to the interests of the country. The majority of Russian citizens do not support this war. Anti-war protests are increasing day by day. "This is Putin's war, not ours," say the Russian rebels. This slogan is also affecting the soldiers in the Russian army. Russian soldiers do not want to die for Putin because the number of those who think that this war is being fought only for Putin's political career is quite high. The other big problem in the Russian army is mercenaries. The Russian army cooperates with the Wagner group for the organization of mercenaries. This mercenary company run by Prigozhin is identified with many war crimes. It is claimed that the Biden government will recognize the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization due to the pressure of Prigozhin, the president of Wagner, on the Russian government. Mercenaries have many privileges. There is a great tension between mercenaries and Russian citizens who are compulsory service. Being in the military, this situation completely disrupts the hierarchical structure in the Russian army. In fact, the hierarchical structure in the Russian army has long been breaking down. Ukrainian troops have killed many generals in Russia. Also, generals who did not want to be part of this war resigned to replace these generals. Many Ukrainian soldiers were promoted. Therefore, the Russian army was led by very inexperienced commanders. This situation led to constant chaos in the Russian army. Due to this chaos, many wrong decisions were made in the Russian army, and a serious vacuum of authority was created. This led to the surrender of more Russian soldiers. The surrender of Russian soldiers has another great advantage for Ukraine. Russia is forced to take back its surrendered soldiers. That's why they need a prisoner exchange. If the Russian army captures Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainian government saves its soldiers by making a prisoner exchange. Thus, the surrendered Russian soldiers ensure the liberation of Ukrainian soldiers. Thanks to the great superiority of the Ukrainian army in this war, Russian soldiers continue to surrender day by day. The Russian army does not have enough soldiers left to fight Ukraine. The Ukrainian soldiers stood like a fortress against the forces that they thought had the most advanced technique of their age, which forced Bakhmut in the small town of Bakhmut, where great struggles were waged and casualties exceeded tens of thousands. The intensity of the clashes has increased considerably in recent days. Another big blow was dealt to the Russian army in Bakhmut, where we witnessed the fiercest struggle on the eastern front line as a result of the successful operations of the Ukrainian armed forces. An ammunition depot belonging to the Russian troops was blown up and destroyed. Is it the bravely fighting hearts that win a war, or cannon rifles? We can find the answer to this question in the Bakhmut front lines, where the tension of the war did not decrease for a minute. Let's take a look at the hot breaking points in Bakhmut and the general situation of Bakhmut from a wider perspective. At the moment, the battles for Bakhmut are actively going on. The Bakhmut River in the city forms the border between the two sides. In the past days, bridges on the river were blown up by successful attacks by Ukrainian rocket and artillery units. With the collapse of the bridges on the river, the Russian and Wagner soldiers here were trapped in the eastern flank of the city. Russian warriors who wanted to cross the western part of the river had a difficult time due to the lack of bridges that could be considered as a way out. However, the days continued to be more difficult for the Russian and Wagner troops in Bakhmut. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the ammunition depot of the Russian troops was shot down and destroyed by the Ukrainian artillery. Considering the current shortage of shells as well as the serious logistical problems in this aspect of the front line, the loss of a large number of shells can cause serious problems. Currently, there are video footage showing the explosion of an ammunition depot taken south of Bakhmut a few days ago. According to preliminary data, the images show the first minutes after the explosion of the ammunition depot. At the same time, it is not known what kind of ammunition we are talking about, since the video only captures the moment of fire that began from the explosion of the warehouse. Considering the intensity of the fire and the huge black clouds beating the sky, it is not difficult to guess that most of the ammunition in the ammunition depot exploded. It is also a matter of curiosity how Vladimir Putin, who is in trouble with logistics and ammunition problems, will fight this deep wound he received. Bakhmut lands on the Wagner Group in one blow on the front line, where the blood pressure does not drop even for a moment, and the sections reminiscent of an action movie chase each other. Let's take a look at what the paramilitary group is going through, as it is known. The tiny 41-kilometer town has become the focal point of Moscow's war against the Ukrainian defense forces. For this small city, besides the regular Russian troops, the soldiers of the Wagner Group were at the forefront. The paramilitary group, mostly ex-prisoners, was thrown into the front lines without thought. Most of the entrained soldiers did not survive the operations organized by the Ukrainian armed forces. The mercenary group received another incurable wound, especially as a result of the attacks carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces on the Wagner headquarters using JDAM missiles the other day. After the Ukrainian army received the American planning bombs of the Jdam family, they began to use these weapons to attack the territory of Bakhmut and its surroundings. When the Jdam missiles fired by Ukraine hit the Wagner headquarters, the headquarters where the soldiers and various ammunition were located blew up in seconds. Huge clouds of dust and gray smoke rose above Bakhmut as bits of debris remained from the headquarters. There has been no official statement yet from the Russian authorities or the leader of the Wagner group about the explosion. Casualties related to the incident remain unclear. However, considering the destructive effect of Jdam missiles and the ammunition in the headquarters, it is possible to talk about serious casualties. On the other hand, this attack is believed to be the first time that Ukraine has used joint direct attack munitions delivered by the US in Russian-controlled territory. Earlier this month, media reports reported that the Ukrainian Air Forces received joint direct attack munitions from the United States that will enable them to hit sizable Russian targets such as bridges and hardened fortifications. Typical Jdams use steerable tail fins to control the bomb's course using an inertial navigation system, GPS guidance, and an autopilot. The complete package includes a new tail, with a GPS-assisted inertial navigation system and skins placed along the body of the bomb, giving the bomb a limited capacity to glide towards the selected target. A Jdam can hit targets at a distance of up to 24 kilometers, depending on the altitude at which it is released. The Jdam rocket increases this distance to approximately 72 kilometers. Also, according to US military analysts, even a few jammers will present Russian forces with unprecedented challenges because they will give Ukraine a precision-guided fire. Forget-me-not, and allow Ukrainian fighter pilots to return immediately after firing and separate themselves from their enemies. Meanwhile, the United States is exploring how to equip its advanced AIM-120 air-to-air missiles to Ukrainian warplanes. Jdam is one of the airdrop bombs. They were originally made for NATO aircraft. Ukraine does not have such a plane, but Ukrainian missiles can be adapted for MiG-29 multi-purpose fighters. In short, the Jdam is capable of hitting targets beyond the reach of the Ukrainians. Current air and ground-launched weapons such as the US-supplied HIMARS and the M270 multiple-launch rocket system supplied by other countries. Also earlier, local Ukraine media reported that the Jdam bomb was first used by the Ukrainian army in the Donbass. The media outlet provided video footage of the explosion confirming this report. The choice of location in this alleged offensive comes at a time when the Ukrainian army has reported that Russian advances on Bakhmut, northern and southern flanks are jeopardizing the supply routes to Kiev city. On the other hand, the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces, Colonel General Oleksiy Andrikievsky, expressed that if Russia captures Bakhmut, it will have free management to expand its operations in the wider eastern region of Ukraine. This is probably why Ukraine continues to fortify and defend the city, although its fall is claimed to be imminent. Consultant Podolyak explained the reasons why the city of Bakhmut, which does not have a strategic importance, is important for Ukraine. Podolyak said in his statement that we have two goals: reduce as much of its combat-ready personnel as possible and squeeze them into several grueling key battles, interrupting their offensive and concentrating our resources elsewhere for the spring counteroffensive. Both countries continue to make great efforts for the city of Bakhmut, where fierce struggles take place. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine shared its latest operational update from the battlefield, emphasizing that its forces have repulsed 102 attacks from 5 key cities, including Bakhmut, amid speculation that Russia may approach the city. According to the share of the Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, despite the significant losses, the Russian troops continue their offensive activities in the directions of Limansky, Bakhmutka, Avdiivka, Mariinsky, and Shakhtar. The last-day units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces repelled 102 Russian attacks on these lines. In addition, the Ukrainian General Staff warned that the level of missile threat remains high throughout Ukraine, stating that Russia has carried out 8 airstrikes and carried out 49 bombardments from bottom-firing jet systems. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's policy of targeting the civilian infrastructure in Ukraine since the first day of the war has still not come to an end. The Ukrainian General Staff emphasizes that the Russian Federation is using terrorist tactics, bombing settlements indiscriminately, and this is a grave violation of international humanitarian law. But the Russian leader ignores these accusations of Ukraine and continues to read what he knows. The fact that Putin, who could not put a stop to the heavy blows he received on the front lines, had no choice but to target the civilian infrastructure paints a picture of the war. The defeated Russian soldiers, the thousands of ammunition destroyed, the front lines of despair are about to drown. The picture of Vladimir Putin in darkness. We will wait and see this together. It is not a secret that the main direction of the Ukrainian counteroffensive is planned to be southern Ukraine. Nonetheless, it is also clear that this is not where the first, second, and maybe even third diverting attack will be conducted. If you look at the map of fights, we can see that almost all engagements are currently taking place around Bakhmut. But as the battle for Bakhmut is near the end, Ukrainians will likely try to fix this enormous amount of Russian troops in the east and prevent them from relocating their forces to the south. The analysts on both sides are speculating that the next big battle will likely take place a bit north of Bakhmut. Siversk is one of the three towns that made up the formidable Siversk-Solidar Bakhmut defense line. Despite the fact that Siversk was considered the weakest spot in this defense, it turned out to be the last stronghold on this line. That really Munitions failed to approach after multiple attempts to penetrate the line. The key to Ukrainian success here once again lies in clever leveraging of the local geography. As you can see, Ukrainians are controlling the hills, and on top of that they are hiding their artillery behind the hills. Conveniently, such positions are not only good for defensive but also offensive efforts. In fact, the tide had already shifted in April as Russians started digging trenches and raising the alarm about the suspiciously high number of Ukrainian tanks in this direction. The heaviest clashes are taking place between Bilohorivka and Rivka. Bilohorivka has been one of the biggest Russian graveyards already for a year. Last year in May, Russians tried to cross the Siversky-Donets River and assault this village multiple times. Ukrainian artillery destroyed the Russian assault units every single time, and after a month of effort, this direction was abandoned. Today, Russians are attacking not from the north but from the south. But so far, these efforts have been unsuccessful as well. Recently, Russian forces relocated thermobaric artillery systems to this direction and managed to capture an isolated water pumping facility. But this is the furthest they advanced because the main Ukrainian positions are located on the hills. While Russians are trying to undercut Bilohorivka from the south, Ukrainians are trying to undermine Russian offensive efforts by assaulting their positions near Zolotaya Rivka. For these purposes, Ukrainians relocated their tanks in this direction and started breaching one Russian position after another. The main objective of these attacks was to eliminate the bulge between Verkhny, Kamiansk and Bilohorivka and ideally create the same bridgehead between Bilohorivka and Zolotarenko. Shortly, the Ukrainian 54th Mechanized Brigade released a video of how they assaulted Russian positions in the three lines 2.6 kilometers west of Zolotaya Rivka, while being under the fire of anti-tank missiles. The Ukrainian tank operator showed extremely high levels of skill as they approached the trench from the low ground to keep low profile, used the trees as distractions, and constantly moved to complicate aiming. Such efforts paid off very quickly as Ukrainians dodged a Russian missile flying less than 1 meter away from the tank. After successfully establishing control over all three lines, the front moved towards the most challenging terrain and the most fortified Russian positions, the so-called Cyclopes. Ukrainians took time to prepare and conducted storming in several stages. During the first stage, Ukrainians imitated a big attack to force Russians to send their reinforcements. When the drone operator spotted moving Russian forces, Ukrainians disengaged and changed their focus on eliminating this group. While the drone operator and mortar crews coordinated to strike Russians with mortars, Ukrainians on the ground used grenade throwers to increase efficiency. Russians did not manage to get to the trenches on time, and one by one, the whole unit, consisting of 10 troops, was successfully eliminated. During the second stage of the operation, Ukrainians switched from mortars and grenade throwers to artillery and drone strikes. The main job of the artillery was to hit the bunker, while the main job of the drone operators was to target Russians in the trenches more precisely. After 7 direct hits and a successful looping of a grenade inside the bunker, the Ukrainian assault unit received a green light to approach the Russian position. During the third stage of the operation, Ukrainians entered the trenches with no hurdles and started storming the bunker. It turned out that several Russians inside were still alive, and they used very convenient firing positions to prevent Ukrainians from getting around them. Trying to enter the bunker directly would also be suicidal. Russians tried to leverage the strength of their position and even made a counterattack, which almost got them killed. Realizing their mistake, they got back to the bunker and continued holding an all-round defense. Shortly, Ukrainians ran out of grenades, and despite outnumbering the Romanian Russians 4-1 and already eliminating 17 out of 21 Russian troops, decided to retreat in order to avoid unnecessary losses and come back later. In the face of such devastating attacks where she started hastily building new strong points in front of Lysychansk. Many Russian sources also raised the alarm about the fact that over the last week, Ukrainians have gathered up to 30 tanks in this direction. As the weather gets warmer and drier, the conditions for a mechanized assault become more and more suitable. The head of the Wagner forces, Prigozhin, said yesterday that he believes that Ukraine has already begun its counteroffensive and cited an increase in Ukrainian activity in the east. Prigozhin also claimed that Wagner's flanks, currently held by conventional Russian airborne troops, are not as prepared as he would have wished. Some analysts estimate the probability of the breakthrough here as very high because Ukrainians are holding the high ground. From here, Ukrainians can open at least 3 lines of attack towards Lysychansk, the oil refinery, and Berestovo. If this series of attacks is successful, Ukrainians open the gate to move down on Soldau and in the rear of the Bakhmut group, which would likely be accompanied by an attack from the south. This would put Russians in an incredibly inconvenient position, as they would either need to leave Bakhmut or relocate even more forces to the east to stabilize the situation. Stabilization of this front would necessarily come at the expense of other fronts. Drain the reserves and fix the troops set in perfect conditions for delivering the main blow.